So the podcast you're about to hear is a recording of the last panel I did at WITMA while being in the modern age. WITMA recently happened in October of 2019 at Contra Studios in New York. The panel that you will hear is a panel about the imagination. When curating this panel, I wanted to include an amalgamation of minds, artists, creators that I felt would speak to the subject matter from a heart-centered place. So the first people that came to mind were Mitch Horowitz, Taraka Larson, Melinda Lee Holm, and Nick Onken. Mitch Horowitz is a writer and author who is widely known. He's a writer in residence at the New York Public Library, a lecturer in residence at the Philosophical Research Society in Los Angeles, and the PEN Award-winning author of a multitude of books, including Occult America, One Simple Idea, How Positive Thinking Reshaped a Modern Life, and The Miracle Club, How Thoughts Become Reality. Taraka Larson has a really cool bio. I'll give you the little bullet points of it, but not much can faze her. Born on Beethoven and Philip K. Dick's birthday, she grew up in ashrams and lived on black metal communes, worked for utopian architects, written manifestos, delivered lectures from pools of fake blood, conducted group exorcisms disguised as VHS workouts, designed a whole line of Byzantine extreme sportswear, and toured the world extensively with her band Prince Rama. Nick Onken is a photographer, podcast host, and creative entrepreneur. He's a world-renowned photographer and host of the Neon Radio podcast, and a creative entrepreneur devoted to inspiring the world to create their moments. And finally, we have Melinda Lee Holm. Melinda Lee Holm is going to be on a forthcoming episode. We had such a lovely conversation on tarot and healing and crystals and all sorts of multidimensional subject matter. But Melinda, as you'll get to know, is a tarot priestess who specializes in translating divine wisdom into actionable guidance. Building on over 25 years of study and practice, she uses her fluency in the language of tarot coupled with her knowledge of crystals, plants, candle magic, and metaphysical principles to identify and open areas of greatest potential for herself and her clients. So with that being said, in the background on all of our panelists, I'll preface this pod by saying this panel is the last WITMA panel that I've decided to be involved in as a partner. As we approach 2020 and the fact that there are 2 months left in this entire decade, I've done a lot of thinking about what I'm carrying into the future and what I'd love the next 10 years to look like. And through that clarification and cultivation process, I've spent a lot of time thinking about who I am and what I am and who I really want to be when I grow up. Funny to say, as a 34-year-old woman, I still don't know when the adult switch is going to turn on, but ultimately, I've come to the decision that I only want to focus my energy on things that are fueling my greatest dream. And my greatest dream truly is to be a creator and to create art, books, movies, podcasts, multimedia that transcends the norm and opens space for new paradigms to emerge. I want to be a good ancestor, which is something that has stuck with me ever since I heard John Perry Barlow give a talk, almost 5 years ago before he passed at the World Technology Network. And one of the things he had shared is make a goal to be a good ancestor. So who knows how much time we have left? Who knows what tomorrow will bring? So all I know is that whatever I'm creating and whatever I'm touching and doing, I want to be something that leaves a legacy of light and love and inspiration. So I'm grateful for WITMA. I learned so much in the 3 events that I helped produce, and in the first 2 events that I was a part of, that it will always have a big part of my heart. But ultimately, I am returning custody to the best mother for the project, which is Anna Lungard, my partner in WITMA. I believe she'll do the best with it moving forward, and I support her 100%. But what you'll hear is the last panel, that probably the last one that I'll ever do for WITMA. So I hope you find value in the conversation. Some really, really epic insight was shared by these beautiful, beautiful beings. In the show notes, I'll recap everybody's social media handles and websites where you can find them all. But for now, just enjoy.
Welcome to Radio Amenti, embracing the eternal now, where minds and timelines merge, inspiring synchronicity, awakening potential and making sense of change.
I'm so thrilled to announce my panelists. So, Taraka Larson is an incredible musician and the former lead singer of Prince Rama. She's toured the world, and her music is unbelievable. So, thank you for joining us, Taraka. Right next to me, I have Mitch Horowitz. Mitch Horowitz is a PEN Award-winning author. He's an occult scholar and somebody that I truly admire for the creations you put into the world. To my left, I have Nick Onken. Nick Onken is a photographer, a podcast host, creative. And finally, at the end, I have Melinda Lee Holm, who is a tarot priestess, creator, all-around Renaissance woman, right?
Yes, correct.
Cool. So, our last panel, we talked about rendering out a brighter future. And a lot of emphasis was placed on the idea of Michael Blunt actually had said, like, as above, so below. So what I'd like to kind of segue into is the idea as within, so without. So speaking of the imagination, I'd love to give each of our panelists an opportunity to talk about what the imagination means to you. So Taraka?
Wow, going first. Okay. What does the imagination mean to me? I feel like when I think about imagination, I think about, we think about it as like a fantasy, or, you know, we're like kind of creating these new fantastical worlds. But for me, it feels more about a process of kind of opening yourself up to magical worlds that already exist, and you're just sort of this, like, you know, spelunker going in the caverns and just kind of checking it out. And so I feel like imagination for me is just putting that spelunking hat on and being like, okay, I'm gonna just shut my mind off and kind of be open to exploring like other possibilities and stuff. So yeah.
No. Well, I was asked earlier today what magic meant to me, magic with a K, ceremonial magic. And I would say magic and the imagination mean very much the same thing to me, which is how I relate to extra-physical forces in our world. And I do think there's a very thin tissue of separation between mental experience and what might be called spiritual experience. And when I say spiritual, I mean very simply that which is extra-physical. We have an ability that we only see through a glass darkly to select events. We have anomalous ways of gleaning information. We experience, I think, an uncanny but entirely natural and necessary reflection of inner thought and outer event. And we also struggle, I believe, with many laws and forces that we experience. It may be that intellect or awareness or consciousness is the ultimate arbiter of reality, and I think it probably is, but within the framework that we find ourselves, we five sensory beings, where most of the time we're five sensory beings, we also have to deal with the experience of limitations and vast laws and forces, and within that we're trying to figure out at what moments do we detect the signal in the noise, at what moments does the imagination and the inner world reflect our experience in the outer world, and it all becomes plain as one whole. But I think those moments can be very fleeting, and we also have to be frank with ourselves, about the fact that we do encounter these limitations, even if at our most relaxed and sensitive moments, such as this one, those limitations seem very distant. They come back in, and I think we have to be frank with ourselves about that too.
Imagination. I think imagination to me is really possibility, living in possibility and creating from within that. I feel like it's about getting back to that child self and playing in the world. And for me, I'm a creative. That's what I do. I make things for a living. I make photographs for a living. And so for me, I think it's really about imagining a world that I want to create, and then putting that to actual use, and to actually go and make things with what I'm imagining in my brain. So
I kind of piggybacking off of what Mitch was saying about the sort of work of imagination. When I deal with tarot clients and people coming in, I think that a big part of what I do is invite them to imagine a world that is different than the world that they're currently living in, right? And that doesn't involve. Sometimes it does, but the vast majority of the time, it doesn't involve changing anything about the actual world, the outside world. It's really the imagination opens up this well of possibilities for a change in perception and in experience. It's almost like learning a new language and being able to convince yourself that there's a possibility. And that's work. I think that imagination sometimes is seen as sort of a frivolous thing, or something like daydreaming. But it really is we have to work at it to open up those doors in order to create possibilities in our lives that wouldn't exist otherwise.
Thank you, Melinda. It's the perfect segue into my next question. So, again, talking about our last panel and things about rendering out a brighter future. We're in a time of great change, of great adversity, of a lot of density. We're constantly in this they live type of reality. We're bombarded with advertisements, consume, obey, where the idea of belief and just having possibility and dreams can sometimes feel like there's no hope. So tapping into spaces of imagination, how do we do this when we're in this world where it just feels so hopeless? So in your own subjective experiences, what are some tools and techniques to really keep you connected to that space of possibility and imagination?
Oh gosh, I have to go first again. Well, first of all, I feel like I just want to make a little addition to, because I was thinking about imagination a little more, to what I was saying before. I think that imagination, more than anything else, is just opening yourself up to realizing that the world, as we see it, is just one sliver, and it's co-created. And we're using our imagination every day, and everything we do. If we imagine our outfit, we imagine, what this panel is going to be like. We imagine what the soup is going to be like. There's a lot of imagination that's just going on subconsciously all the time. It's not really something you work at necessarily, although you can become conscious of it. And so I think the more you become conscious of it, you realize that there's an objective reality and then there's a subjective reality. And imagination is sort of that handmaiden that sort of you can reach across the gulf and kind of bridge those two together and kind of dance with it. And so I think even thinking about, this world seeming, even the way you frame the question is there's a lot of density, there's a lot of adversity. That's also, there's something objective about that. We can all kind of agree. How many people agree? Yes, there's a lot of density and adversity going on. Yes? But then also, that is something that we're projecting into this, So that's partly an imagination. It's partly objective, but it's also something, it's like a collective imagination that we've all agreed upon, that there is adversity and there is density. So I think as soon as, I don't know, for me, I guess when I think about adversity and density and stuff in my own life, it's not necessarily about like, let's imagine a reality where that just doesn't exist. It's more like, okay, I have some sort of like adversarial experience or like something that feels really heavy. How can I basically just look at this as less of this is the only reality, but see like, okay, there's a lot of other layers of the onion here, and which one makes me feel the most relaxed, you know? And I think when you can imagine, just it's about matching your relationship really, and just kind of seeing like, okay, this is something really dense here, but yet we go to the gym and pick up heavy things and it makes us strong. That's a way of imagining a different relationship to that heavy thing, where it's like actually beneficial for you, and you like go get a green juice afterwards and congratulate yourself. You're like, yeah, I picked up a lot of heavy things today, you know. So I think it's more about imagining, using the imagination just to help you feel more relaxed and aligned in whatever your relationship is with this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I respond to that, especially about the lifting of heavy things. I mean, within friction, there can be tremendous creative potential. And I don't want to suggest that creative potential offsets crises. I mean, I certainly don't want to see people suffer. I don't want to see people in power behave in ways that debase other people. But I am aware that, as a friend of mine puts it, opposition is the best friendship. And there can be tremendous potentials unleashed when there's a great deal of friction going on in the world. And I think that that's something to be watched for very, very, very carefully right now. Several weeks ago, there was a panel at the Guggenheim Museum about UFOs, of all things. Some of you may have been there. Not your typical fair, you know, at the Guggenheim. And afterwards, the curator said to me, listen, let me ask you a question. At what point do you think it's going to become intellectually embarrassing, just intellectually untenable, for somebody to voice complete and utter disbelief in UFOs? And I thought it was a great question. And I said, you know, in my heart of hearts, honestly, right now, I honestly feel we as a generation have literally just turned that point. The release recently of video from the Pentagon and the Navy showing cockpit recordings of what are effectively UFOs, I think has engendered a shift right now that you wouldn't have even felt 6 months ago. And although that touches only tangentially on what we're talking about, it's just an example of how I think there's a tremendous state of flux going on. And the fact that, you know, somebody now can no longer wave their hands in dismissal at UFOs doesn't offset environmental destruction and, you know, the wonderful, wonderful things happening in the White House and so on and so forth. But I really encourage you, watch the world and your own work as a creative or whatever you may do very, very carefully, because I think that there are just tremendous things that are being unlocked right now in potential. Some good, some bad, you know, depending upon where one sits. But watch for those things in your life.
So adversity. Well, I would say adversity. There's external adversity, and I think there's a lot of, internal adversity. I think, especially with creatives and with art, your mind is your own prison, and I think the monkey chatter of your mind keeps you from accessing creative flow. It keeps you from accessing your imagination, and I think that, you know, different tools that I've used are like meditation, breath work, psychedelics, different things that actually pull you out of your default mode network in your brain, things that get you out of your head. Those are different modalities that I use that have helped me get out of my head and help me access creative flow a lot more. And those are daily, that's work. And it's a lot of work to really get out of that monkey chatter. It's something you have to practice every day. And the more that you practice these things, the more it allows you to tap into that flow. It allows you to tap into your imagination. For me, I do Vedic meditation every day, and it's like such a huge grounding piece. And it acts as almost like you're emptying the trash in your mind. And I can't go a day without it. I can't go a morning without doing it, and it really sets the tone. I think also for me, gratitude practice every day helps set the tone of the day and activate a space of creativity. So for me, those modalities have been huge in the last few years of my journey.
For me, I think that it's, when there's so much going on and there, it's so much strife and internalizing it, like you were saying, it's really important to get very high priestess about it. And, the wisdom of the high priestess in the tarot is really about the temple building and temple maintenance. And, for some people that can sound like a big hurdle, like, well, I don't have, I live with my parents, I don't have a room of my own, or I have roommates, I don't have a space that I have control over. But having any sort of space that you designate, including, through meditation, your own body as being that space in your own mind, kind of a high-level challenge. For some people, it's easier to start with the external. Some sort of space where that's only dedicated to personal work, to spiritual work, to to the divine, to magic, that you only do in that situation. And there in some traditions, having a chair that you only sit in when you meditate. You don't do anything else in that chair. And really just starting there and carving out, it's like flexing your muscle, and flexing your heart muscle to create a little space for yourself in the world that is free from that adversity, that's free from all of that stuff, that's just for you to sort of connect with the divine, with the earth, with your own power, so that you have that, then you can access that childish in the best possible way. I don't mean that as a derogatory thing. That font of imagination to still be in that mode.
I love that. I really appreciate what you all shared. And thinking about that, the idea of belief, right? There's this whole idea that sometimes you have to see things to believe in them, and sometimes you also have to believe in things in order to see them. And what Taraka said, if we believe this is our narrative, we believe that we're in this adversity, we're feeding that. I'm a big nerd, and I love the never-ending story, which is basically like anthroposophy for beginners if you're an esoteric person. So it's this idea that we're the reader and we're the writer, we're the creator. Our language is so powerful in formulating our stories, and our stories become our myths, which is the perfect kind of move forward to Michael's panel on the hero's journey. So reframing the way we look at things. So how do you believe belief really factors in beyond the lifting? So belief and imagination.
What's the question?
So belief, like what are ways to kind of shift your consciousness around belief,
Good question. I'm working on that right now. I think I read something recently about how belief is, people put a lot of emphasis on believing in something really positive, but then I think it was Alan Watts was talking about, don't believe anything. Belief actually comes from feeling like a place of lack. Like, this doesn't really exist, but believe this. I'm going to believe in God because I hope, I don't really feel it. I don't know. I don't see it. But I'm just going to believe and try to convince myself. He's like, don't believe. I guess this kind of leads to another question for me. I don't really know how to answer your question. I'd be curious to hear what other people have to say about belief, because I think, for me, shifting doesn't really come from belief. It kind of just comes from more of like repeated failure and being like, wow, if this is like the empirical method here, this really doesn't work. I've been doing this a long time. This isn't working. Okay, let's try something else. And I don't know if belief would be like the word I would use. Maybe like, because you feel it. You're like, I feel like this, there's another reality. And I think that's, again, where imagination comes in, where it's like, you're aware that there are so many different narratives that your life can take. You know, there's like so many characters you can play from like one day to the next, and they're all fully developed and they're all fully real. And so is it like, do I want to be the villain today or do I want to be the hero? And they both exist. And I don't even know if that's like, you have to believe that both exist, although some days you have to kind of convince yourself. But I think it's like just remembering more than anything else. It's like it's all there. It's just like we get amnesia. And so just like remembering or something. But that's how shifts happen for me. But I don't know, maybe someone else has...
Well, with regard to belief, I'll share something I've been working with lately, which may touch upon it in a certain way. I'm really, really interested in practices that are very, very workable. You know, I want people to get places. I wish the same thing for myself as I wish for everybody in this room, which is that you find a practical means of getting where you want to go. I believe desire is sacred. I believe human creativity is sacred. Mine is not a path of non-attachment. Mine is not a path of non-identification. I believe that if the individual is him or herself molded in the image of the Creator, which we'll hear in many different traditions, then the individual is at his or her apex when creating and is capable of creating. And I really honor people's desires, and I think people's desires and wishes are often enormously valid and require no excuse. In that vein, I'm always on the lookout for practices that I believe are very practical, and including ancient practices in as much as they've come down to us today. These things get interrupted, and sometimes we only have little threads of ancient ideas. But I do really believe that our primeval ancestors across all different cultures, Egypt, Polynesia, the Celtic cultures, the Hellenic cultures, I do believe our primeval ancestors were right, in a way, in personifying energies and calling these energies their gods, you know, given different names, whether it be Minerva or Zeus or Set or what have you. This practice among our ancient ancestors on every continent, literally, everywhere across the world, existed for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And I simply can't dispense with the possibility that they were altogether right. And I encourage people, if there's a deity, for example, from any facet of history that appeals to you, that personally resonates with you, that speaks to you, learn about that deity. Worship that deity, petition that deity. My thesis is that the old gods are lonely, they're starved, they're hungry for human veneration. You may be very surprised at what happens. I would say do it tonight. You don't have to tell anybody you're doing it. You don't have to tell your shrink, you know, or your boyfriend or whatever. They'll just think you're crazy anyway. Nor do you have to put a label on yourself or be public about it. You don't have to post about it. It's just something to try, and I invite you to see what happens. That's something I'm working with.
So can you rephrase the question?
Belief as a tool for shifting consciousness.
Yeah, so belief as a tool for reshifting or shaping consciousness. I think, you know, something I've been toying around with a lot recently is the idea of mental construct, right? We create the mental construct that we want to live in, and that along with that comes belief. And I think you look at so many different religions and spiritual practices around the world, and if you've ever read their book Sapiens, it's a really great book. It's an anthropological view of human history from Neanderthal to current day, and they talk about the construct of religion and how you have the three most prominent religions of the world come out of the same geographic location. And then you have, at the same time period, other tribes, other people on the other side of the world that come up with their, they have their own religion or spiritual beliefs. And at the end of the day, everybody's trying to explain the same thing that nobody can really explain, and it's the connection between us as humans and the higher power that exists, and whatever that is. And for everyone, it's different. And I think at the end of the day, it's about feeling, coming to the idea of wholeness for yourself, and whatever belief system that is for you, I think that is something to explore and to create. It's about internal happiness, right? And where does that come from, right? That I think the internal happiness comes from living in the present, and not, all human suffering comes from either living in the future or the past. When we're either regretting the past or fearing the future, if we can learn how to get to the present moment, that also creates happiness. That's probably my belief as well. So, belief is something that is the construct that you create, that you choose to create, that you choose to live in, that you choose to operate your life from. So, I would say, live the best life that you can, and whatever belief system that takes for you to go and pursue that.
Yeah. I find that belief can actually be quite limiting or even damaging to reshaping reality. And I work with that a lot. There's, one of the cards in the deck, the Tower card, I'm just going to talk about everything about tarot because that's how I see the whole entire world, and I can't stop. But the Tower card, if you're not familiar with it, it's this terrifying-looking card, and there's a tower, and there's a lightning bolt striking. It's on fire. There's people jumping out of the window all the time up there. And it comes down, especially people who don't know much about tarot, I see them just, stiffen, and wherever it is in the spread, we're going to talk about this first, because it's freaking you out, and you can't listen to anything else. And my view on it is that it's not, there are no bad cards, there are no good cards. Everything is challenging, different things are challenging for different people. And the Tower represents beliefs, rigid belief systems, where you just think, this is just how it is. This is what I should do, this is just how it is. If your belief system tells you that you are not allowed to grow up and sit on a stage and call yourself a tarot priestess in front of people, then if you're me, that's damaging, right? Then I can't be sitting here. And I mean, for all of us up here, nobody's living a conventional life within these sort of conventional walls of the towers that society builds for us. So in that sense, I think that breaking down belief can actually be a really great tool for reshaping reality. And it's something that I try to continue to do as a practice all of the time, to let that be a living process.
Cool. So, thinking about all of this, and I love what Mitch said about ancient wisdom and the ancient gods, something that we both resonate with. There's a text called the Kabbalion, and they talk about how the all is mind, the universe is mental. And there's an author named Joseph Chilton Pierce, who I really love, and he talks about man's mind mirrors a universe that mirrors man's mind. So in that space of spaciousness, if the all is mind and we're all these fractals of mind, how do you take that and infuse that into your creativity? I think sometimes things get lost in something that's under a New Age lens, like this idea, the law of attraction, and we're visualizing the car and whatever. It can turn very fluffy and kind of, a little saccharine bullshit, if you're being honest. But how do you take the intangible and make it tangible through a creation that actually feels useful?
How do you take the intangible and make it tangible in a way that feels useful?
Through your creativity.
These huge questions. I need a second.
I can, if you want a second, I can jump in. Should I give you a second?
Yeah, please.
Can we get, okay.
Yeah.
For me, it's very much, it's the earth element. There's 5 elements on the pentagram. We need them all. When I'm going through, we need all 5 of them, and we often forget earth, a way to ground out practice and bring it forward in a way that's very that's actionable, right? And I think that, like, whenever I do a reading, I don't want to just give people information, just like be very air element and tell them a bunch of things, even if it's emotional, you know, in the water, like deal with what the emotional experience is, what the sort of intuitive experience is, all of those. But that earth element is, I think, missing in a lot of the new agey stuff, like envision a car, like, okay, great. Like, if I'm living on $1,000 a month, like, I can't envision my way out of that. Like, there's got to be something else. And so I think, like, getting grounded down into elemental earth. And if you have a hard time with that, by the way, just go take your shoes off and go stand in dirt somewhere. Walk around with a garnet in your pocket. Eat root vegetables, right? It doesn't have, it's earth element. You don't have to think about it. That's air element, like really getting it down into that tangible earth. I'm just going to say the word earth again. Sorry.
Okay. I'll go. Making things tangible in a useful way. Goethe wrote, in effect, what you wish for when you're very, very young will come upon you in waves when you're old, so be careful. And this is what became our popular expression, careful what you wish for, you just might get it. And that was his outlook on life. And it's a funny thing because a lot of people on first blush would want to argue with that and say, well, gee, there's all kinds of things in my life that I certainly didn't wish for when I was very young, and I have this and that unfulfilled dream. And I would say, well, take a pause, and take seriously what he observed. He wasn't trying to obfuscate or mislead or hurt anybody. And I would say, allow yourself to think back to truly some of your earliest memories and dreams, including literal dreams, when you first formed consciously accessed long-term memories, like going back to age 3, age 4. And I honestly have to say that having done this exercise with just as much unembarrassed self-scrutiny as I'm capable, I find an uncanny congruency between the life I'm leading today and the earliest fantasies that I had, and dreams, sometimes literal dreams, when I was 3 or 4 years old. And I would invite you to do that. And I think that when we hold to something in a very, very unencumbered way, which children are able to do because at that age, they're, in all honesty, they're probably just starting to feel peer pressure, but they're less subject to it. There's a certain degree of freedom at age 3, 4 that the world hasn't taken from us yet through peer pressure and other things. It's there, but it hasn't cemented itself. And I think children are able to feel things, feel emotive thoughts very, very, very deeply. And if you can persuade yourself of the validity of Goethe's observation, which I'm persuaded of, but that's, of course, up to every individual, then you may be able to persuade yourself of how incredibly powerful your most passionately felt, emotionalized thoughts are and where that can take you. There's amazing power there, and I invite you to experiment with that. Now you have to go.
All right. Well, I mean, it's a cool question because, I feel like I just work with, as a musician, all you're working with is intangible forces, basically. You're working with sound. And so that's, I'm the most into that. But yeah, in terms of like making it tangible, maybe I'm just thinking about stuff too much. I'm like, what's really tangible, what is that difference between intangible and tangible? Sometimes I don't know. I think it's pretty fluid. But in terms of sound, I guess the first thing that kind of comes into my mind is think about cymatics. Are you guys familiar with cymatics? So cymatics are basically it's like this sort of way of working with sound. It was like some early experiments by some scientist dudes who were, the basic idea is, you have like a speaker and you put a tone through it. And if you put like a plate with some sand or some salt on top of it, and you make a tone like Om, for instance, like Om, and it vibrates the sand, and it's incredible, the stuff that comes out. I mean, it just, if you've ever looked up pictures, I really highly encourage you guys to look up pictures right after this lecture. Just look up cymatics, and when you put the tone Om through a speaker, it literally forms this incredible mandala, and it's amazing. And so there's a lot of conjectures about, okay, well, if you put these sorts of tones and it can move matter in this certain way, there's a lot more going on in the relationship between sound and the universe than what we're giving it credit. I mean, some of these sounds, you look at it and it just looks like forms in nature. I think it was 5 to 8 hertz or something. It looks like a tortoise shell. And some of these things, it almost, you could just see these elements of human anatomy. And so then you just start, going into just, again, imagination. I just start thinking about what tone was made to make our bodies, and there's just countless experiments with this kind of stuff. And, what was the name of that Japanese scientist? Was it
Masaru Emoto?
Yes, thank you. Masaru Emoto was making all of these experiments with sound and making these frozen petri dishes. And so he would play Chopin to a cup of water, and flash freeze it and observe what sort of crystals formed, and there'd be these beautiful, really intricate crystals. Then he'd play 9 Inch Nails to another petri dish, and it would be kind of fucked up and stuff. But I mean, he did it. What I thought was even more interesting was he would do it in a room. He would put a glass of water in a room where people were saying really nice things to each other, "Oh, you're so beautiful. Oh, I love you." And, the water was very nicely formed crystals. And then there's this other room where, a couple's arguing, "I hate you. Never do the dishes." Whatever. And, the crystals are all they reflect that. They're kind of broken. And you think about our bodies. I mean, we're the majority of our bodies is water. And so you think about how many vibrations we're absorbing every day, and how that's affecting literally our anatomy, And so thinking about sound, it has direct effect on, our tangible reality. And so when I think about music, I mean, I noticed right away, the music I listen to, I could change my mood like that, And so when I'm making music, I feel I'm really thinking about what is this vibration I'm kind of putting out there, and also how is it shaping me? How is this music shaping my body and carving me into this instrument of it? And so it's a really it's an interesting process. That's all I got.
I like that. I think for me, and kind of almost with that same idea, is I have this hashtag that I've been using for such a long time called Create Your Moments. And for me, that was derived from actually my photo shoots and how I actually orchestrate photo shoots on set. And I really, it's creating the intention without the expectation of the results. And when you create the space, you create the space for magic to happen. And so a lot of times with the photo shoot, I'll bring all the elements into place, whether it's the location, the talent, the model, the clothes, whatever it is. And then we play, and we create the space for that magic to happen. And so many times, the beautiful je ne sais quoi of the photograph happens within that space. It happens within that moment. And I think that directly correlates with life, right? If we're creating our life with intention, but leaving the space for magic to happen, that's where those tangibles come into effect. And especially if we're not married to a sort of result or an expectation, or I have to have this, or I have to have this result. You can have this intention, but be open to what the universe will bring you. Be open to the magic that's going to unfold right in front of you.
Beautiful. That's a great kind of piggyback into our last question for our panel, and then we'll open it up to a few questions to the audience. But yeah, thinking about the sense of play, I think actually Alan Watts also said to think about that what you're doing isn't work, it's actually play. So how do you evoke this sense of playfulness in your life? Like Taraka and I actually met on the set of a pilot for a TV show where I did her makeup as a goblin. So like literally we bonded over that and got to play. So how do you incorporate play, or what kind of words of encouragement would you offer to just inspire that more, to play?
You, man.
Okay. Play. I do believe that things that we pretend, or the make-believe world that we live in, is emotionally charged, and it can present us with an act of selectivity. It can really, really present us with an act of selectivity. I'm struck by an experiment that was conducted many years ago. I think this now goes back to the mid-1980s by a psychologist at Harvard named Ellen Langer. And she's repeated the experiment since several times, and she comes in for all kinds of criticism, but lots of people in the social sciences field come in for criticism. There's no reason to single out someone whose thesis is controversial. I mean, there are mundane theses that turn out to be wrong all the time, controversial ones that turn out to be correct. Langer brilliantly took a collection of subjects who were living in an assisted living facility for seniors, and she put them into settings that were designed specifically to be nostalgic, that contained media and music and clothing and television shows and even newspapers and magazines from when they were young. It was this Disneyland of youth, designed and catered specifically to this elder population. And her data demonstrated that within a period of weeks, certain age-related bodily manifestations began to reverse. Hypertension or blood pressure lowered, muscle mass increased, feelings of depression were reported alleviated. Even, and this is very strange, but this was the data that she found, even eyesight began to improve. And there were a whole range of physiological associations with aging that were demonstrated to be reversed. And it was quite extraordinary. And I have found, just in my own experience and as somebody who is a student of life, like all of you, that when people continue to put themselves in contact with things that are profoundly and passionately arousing to them, in terms of music, in terms of media, in terms of sexuality, in terms of how you dress, the effects are a tonic to the being in ways that are physical, in ways that are psychological, in ways that I think keep your spiritual life, and again, when I say spiritual, I just mean extra physical, alive. So play, I think, can have layers of value beyond what we sometimes understand.
That's beautiful. I think, of course, this is just, I have to just say it through my subjective lens of music. When I think about play, I automatically think, well, you play music. And that's a term that we all just, it's very normal. Oh, yeah, you're playing music. Yeah, you play music. But you don't really think about play in other terms. Like, we have to have a whole panel discussion about play and how we can incorporate it into our daily life. Yeah, like make it useful. But with music, you're just like, oh, yeah, we just play music. It's like very natural. And for me, music goes deeper than just playing music. I mean, it's not just this thing we hear, but it's also just the choreography of how the whole world works. And that's the layer of the onion that I'm the most interested in. And there's lots of other layers of the onion, but that's the one that resonates the most with me. So when you see everything as music, and right now, just got a little more silent and stuff. You know, you're seeing everything, like in terms of this sort of continuous song. Play is just your natural way of interacting with it, you know. So, thank you. Yeah. You are too. Thank you. So I don't know. For me, play is just more of, like a way of maintaining that practice, because that's what I'm the most interested in spelunking in, is the world as music. So if I'm going to do that, then play is the only way to really kind of relate to it. But there's lots of other ways too, so I don't know.
All right, I like that. Spelunking, that's a good word. I think for me, it's really, I mean, play is a state of being, but it takes a special and extra awareness to actually create that state change. At least it does for me, because it's not always a natural state. And I'm sure as with everyone here, we have daily life. We have like regular things that we have to do and bills to pay in New York City to like pay for and live in. And so a lot of times we can get stuck in that loop and stuck in that space. And I think being able to become aware and create a state change of play and exploration and exploring the imagination and creative flow, that's the first place to start. And obviously different modalities to do that. But I think it's always about being curious. It's always about playing and experimenting and letting go of the editor and being open to making and exploring and meeting new people and having interesting conversations and making things. And that's where that play comes from. And I think that play accentuates creative flow. And that creative flow, you know, can create bliss and happiness.
Something that I've been working with a lot lately that I'm just realizing relates to play in this way is the idea of not pushing. And when you see little kids playing, they don't say, we're going to play tag, and we're going to play tag until 4:45, so nobody give up, right? When you play until you're done. And you don't know when you're going to be done. You play, and then you say, I don't feel like it anymore, and you go and do something else. And, you know, that's might sound like something that's easier for me to do. Like, nobody gave me my job title. It's like I make it up as I go along. But it's very useful when you're pursuing something and pushing against it, and it becomes heavy. You feel this shift where it's becoming heavy. You're not getting the feedback. It's not opening anymore. It's starting to close down. If you think about all of life as play, then when you get to that moment, walk away. You know, not like you burn your life up and walk away forever, though sometimes we have to do that. But it should just turn it a little bit. Like, go do something else. If you work in an office, drink a ton of water, and then you have to go to the bathroom all the time, right? You just, like, have to get up and walk away. Right? I'm all about that earth element. I've got practical solutions for life's problems, right? Like, it's easier, you know, for me, I'm trying to push tarot wisdom and guidance out into the world in all of these ways, and I can only read for so many people, so I'm doing all this other stuff. And some of it works and some of it doesn't. And when it doesn't, I don't have to mourn it or feel like a failure or feel bad about it. I just try to be like a little kid and go, no, okay, let's play something else. And then have another avenue to channeling that energy that's going to be a little bit more fruitful.
Amazing. Thank you all. Such profound wisdom, amazing minds. So thank you.
Thank you.
So just out of respective time for our panelists, I'm going to open it up to 2 questions. So whoever has a question for our panelists, if you'd like to share.
I wanted to ask, because I've loved everyone's answers, how different they are and how they all come together to kind of like expand my mind and my heart. I want to know if any of you struggle with perfectionism.
So the question is, for those who didn't hear, if any of our panelists struggle with perfectionism.
Yes.
Yes.
Profoundly, desperately. my whole life for a lot of reasons that would take a really long time to get into, or I can give you my therapist's number and she can fill you in on a lot of it. But yeah, I really, and I assume the question, the follow-up question then is, how do you deal with it, right? Part of it is that what I was just talking about, that if I'm pushing up against something and it's not going, then I walk away. Sometimes I'm on deadline, like writing something, I'm on deadline. If I can walk away for 20 minutes and just shift my perspective, put myself in a different state of mind, and really, do a lot of self-care things, and I have, sometimes, for me, the perfectionism comes from not feeling safe, and major fear that I will be rejected profoundly, and so just walking away and reminding myself, I am safe, I am safe, I am safe, right? So if that's finding out where the perfection is coming from, and so that you're not pushing on the perfection itself isn't going to do it. It's what's the root of it, and then finding out how you can self-soothe.
I suffer from perfectionism and hyperfocus and OCD and every possible neurosis. And I would suggest this. And I totally I honor that answer very deeply, because if something is disrupting a person's life, then obviously it's become a real problem. But I would offer the possibility that sometimes the artist or the creative, experiencing these things may be painful, but friction can be the price of great, beautiful creativity. I mean, I'm very inspired by stories that I've heard, or even things that I've witnessed from artists who drive themselves to the point of almost, physical breakdown, but they create very, very, very beautiful things, and things that have posterity, which for me personally has outweighed the difficulties of perfectionism or obsession or hyperfocus. It may be that, all of those things are just metaphors for the artistic temperament.
Yeah, I would say, all the time, for sure. And I think for me, I grew up with a lot of a fear of judgment my whole life, especially growing up in a very religious home. And so that's played out throughout my whole life. And I think that it's learning, a big piece of it is learning where that perfectionism comes from and what are you afraid of, and diving into the root of that. But then also, what people have told me is also being kinder to myself. And, I think, and then that goes back into play, right? You can play and play and play, but then let the editor come in afterwards and be the perfectionist after you've allowed yourself to play.
You're my sister, so you know how perfectionistic I can get. This is my sister, you guys, Nimai. I played in a band with her for 10 years. And so, as you know, man, that perfectionism can be insane. It's really, for me, I feel like it's a form of self-sabotage, and because it doesn't really exist. There is no such thing as perfectionism, and I think the closest thing that music has gotten to perfection is Katy Perry or Lady Gaga or something. It's just boring. It's sorry for Lady Gaga fans and stuff, but, I think my point is just that, we've gotten to the point where we can dial in music so well now. With pop music, you can make, in effect, perfect music. You can auto-tune your voice to perfect pitch, beat match, all the instruments, everything is in a grid. It's perfect, but man, doesn't it feel good to just listen to Rolling Stones with that tambourine that's just dirty and out of time, It's just, you lose that soul. The soul of the universe isn't perfect. It's messy, it's sloppy, it's, but it's beautiful. And I feel that I think just embracing yourself, you're not perfect, you're not beat matched, but that's what makes you beautiful, and it's actually a lot more relaxing to listen to irregular sounds of the ocean waves than just to listen to like this like perfect, like, we would just be listening to techno music to go to sleep if that made us really relaxed. But instead we like to listen to, the irregular sounds, like the night sounds or the wind or something, because there's something very relaxing about it. It's like a lot more in tune with our inner nature. So I think just embracing your inner nature and all the, like messy chaos, it's part of it. It's actually like a lot more relaxing way to be. So, yeah.
Amazing. So one more question.
So what do you advise for people who are trying to break through their shyness in terms of expressing themselves and breaking through some of the types of insecurities that actually turn them into artistic people in the first place?
So the question was advice for breaking through shyness so that you can express those artistic abilities.
Ayahuasca. Yeah, I would say plant medicine. It's I did ayahuasca for the first time this summer and down at WITMA, and it really takes you. It's like 20 years of therapy, and it really takes you to the root of where that comes from, right? Like, where does that shyness come from? What's the fear? Where did that fear come from? And plant medicine will show you where it comes from. And I think there's a lot of work that you can do through that, and and a lot of healing. And it'll show you many, many beautiful things, and heal you in the process.
You could do a little tarot magic on it. Queen of Swords would be a great archetype to look to. She's the master of expression from the heart. So, instead of overthinking like what the communication's going to be, which could sort of exacerbate the shyness, like really tapping into that emotional center. Aquamarine for communication, for clear communication. Rhodochrosite for self-love. Some carnelian for courage. That sort of trifecta would be really good. And if you want to like grab a 7-day candle, put those 3 stones around it in a little triangle, light it, and let that magic sink in that way.
Why do you think you're shy? I mean, you just asked a question. That was pretty brave.
I'm just advocating for the shy people that are afraid to ask that question.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, I have that side that I have that surface. Like I've had that surface, and that surface has turned. And I'm always very curious about how people who kind of come into their kind of artistic expression through that alienation. I'm always very curious about that particular path and that process. So I feel like I've kind of broken through that. How did you do it? How did you do it?
Do you want a mic?
Yeah, no, just for please.
Come on up.
Yeah, come on up.
Shy guy.
Come on up. Wait, what's your name?
Oops. Carol, get behind the mic. Sorry. My name's Scott. Hi. Hello.
Hi, Scott.
Hi, Scott.
Hello. Carol, sorry, getting some feedback. Okay, so I guess I'll try to be really short. I'll take the chair. Okay, fine.
Woo!
Thank you. So I think part of it is just kind of taking a moment to really be quiet. Like I guess when we're shy, we're usually kind of outwardly quiet and inwardly loud. Yeah, the voice is just kind of. So a lot of it is just kind of slowing things down, and there's a thing that I used to imagine, like this kind of creative visualization thing that I started doing when I was a teenager. And it went something like this, where I would close my eyes, and I would imagine everything around me disintegrating. I would imagine the sounds of everything around me just kind of becoming very very quiet and still. And I would kind of go through gray, like these kind of gray skies, gray clouds, and I'd enter this room. And the room itself looked like this, that there was this chessboard floor, and in the sky, it was just the open universe. There was a closet, and inside of the closet were the skeletons. And there was a mirror and a blackboard. And what I would imagine is that I would go into the closet, I'd open it up, and I'd take the bones, one by one, and I'd write on the blackboard with the bones until the bones became nothing but dust. And all those bones represented fears or just things that I hadn't processed yet, but that I dealt with it one at a time, one thing at a time. Because when we're bombarded by all this noise, by people yelling at us, by the sound of sirens, by the vibrations and in the walls that come from, just come from the electricity pulsing through the lines. We can't hear it, but we can feel it. The cell phones that are in our pockets, we can feel all that resonance and vibration, and that's why it's great when we go out into nature. But when we're in this urban environment, it's really hard to kind of take stock. It really takes a lot of effort. So the idea is to basically take the bones as chalk and be very honest and non-judgmental. Like the things that you fucked up on, the things that you fear, the things where you allow yourself to experience this because you're in this private place inside of your mind where you need to be free from judgment. For that moment, you need that respite. And you take it one at a time. You take your time. And sometimes the skeletons in the closet will accumulate, and sometimes they'll just kind of disintegrate, and it changes over time. But the idea is to basically write it out on the blackboard and then to look into the mirror and see yourself as you transform when you release things. And that was part of it. Myself, I didn't really talk to people, but I talked to adults, but I didn't really talk to my peers until I was about 17 years old. I was like incredibly shy and angry. It's just very. I can't even describe just like how like I lived in my head, and it was at that point that I kind of really opened up. But we all have our own times. But I hope this is helpful for you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks. What are your guys? What's your process?
Yeah.
Oh, that was so cool. Thank you. For me, I feel like music has helped me so much. Like when I feel shy, oh my God, so much. Yeah, I feel like I don't know. What you were saying with like writing with the bones. I think it was Nietzsche has like a quote like "write with blood, and you will experience blood as spirit." And I think shyness comes a lot from just losing touch with that spirit. We become so encased in these bodies and just forgetting and thinking of ourselves as separate and just forgetting that, they tell performers if you're shy in front of a room of people, imagine everyone with their underwear, and don't worry, I'm not imagining all you guys in your underwear. Or am I? I think the modus behind that, though, is just that we're all, when you're shy, you forget that you're feeling very vulnerable, and you think you're the only one, and you forget that we're all pretty vulnerable. We're all just trying to connect with each other, and not kind of in these awkward bodysuits, like not, remembering how to make it work. And so, even if you can just get to that place, to connect with yourself and be vulnerable with yourself, and if you can just do it with one other person, even you don't have to speak or anything, even just with your eyes, just be able to establish some sort of spirit connection through your eyes. It just, it just helps remind you that we're all just figuring it out, man. Like, we're all just, vulnerable and scared and want love and, want to connect with people. So, it's okay. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I want to hear your answer too, especially because you have a research pen, and that is one of the best publishing companies ever. They had the best book on pranks. They had so many amazing books. If you guys can search for research books that are fantastic, please.
I'll make it very quick.
Yeah.
I don't do pranks, but whoops. I've never suffered from shyness. Anxiety has been my burden. And I have found that as time passed, the anxiety eased through a mixture of pharmacology, which is why I like the ayahuasca answer, through being around the right people, through finding my way to exactly the right environment that I wanted to be in life, and being very strict about it with myself. And it eased. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Can we give a round of applause for all of our incredible panelists? Thank you all so much. We got to wrap up. I'm sorry.
Can we hear from you? Because you're the facilitator, and I would love to hear your advice. Because
I can totally wrap it up at the end of it with some wisdom, but for the respective time, we went over. So thank you all.